morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar where we'll be exploring the topic of running and growing a successful brokerage. My name is Jane Mason and I will be your moderator today. Just a couple little bits of housekeeping to get out of the way. We'll have an opportunity for questions throughout the webinar and also at the end. We have our panelists in the hot seat for the next hour, so do not be shy. Send your questions through and we'll try and get to them all. Just when you are sending through your questions, please make sure you submit them through the question tab on the screen rather than the chat function, just to make sure that comes through to me. So without further ado, let's get the webinar started. I'd like to thank obviously everyone that's registered. We have about 600 brokers that are registered and online with us today. So welcome and thank you for your support. And first and foremost, thank you to each of our panelists for being here today. I think they probably need little introduction and are fairly well known in the industry. So I will keep the introductions brief, but for the sake of formalities, I'd like to welcome Peter Conquest. Welcome, Pete. Thanks for being here with us today. Pete commenced his career in funds management and he spent 10 years at Macquarie Bank, where he was the head of banking to the insurance sector. Pete actually made the conscious decision to join the insurance industry after attending a careers day at a school and hearing his mates speak about his role in insurance. So Pete joined P&O Insurance as a director in 2011 and has been with P&O since then. Thanks, Pete. Great to have you with us.
Thanks, Jane.
Next up, thanks, Mike. Next up, we have Mike. Welcome, Mike. Mike McShane started his career in 1975, and not trying to give your age away here, Mike, but we will let everybody know that today is actually Mike's birthday. So happy birthday, Mike. So Mike started career in 1975. He's worked in all facets of the insurance industry. In 1999, he decided to take his destiny into his own hands when he started his own business, McShane Business Services, which he grew consistently over the following 8 years until he joined forces with his now business partner, Don McClarty, in 2007, when they started the very well-known and well-respected McClarty McShane. Great to have you here, Mike.
Thanks,
Next
Jane.
up, we have Beck. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you, Jane.
Bex has a career in insurance spanning over 20 years. After some extensive experience in the broking space, she furthered this experience by joining Austbrokers ABS at the age of 30. At the age of 35, Beck became the general manager of Austbrokers ABS, and 13 years later, she's still with ABS and is currently the managing director. Welcome, Beck. Great to have you with us.
Thanks, Jane.
And finally, last but not least, Michael Gottlieb. Michael's first foray into the insurance industry was in 2001 when he started his own brokerage, Mega Capital. He also started Brokerage Experian, which I believe was in 2003, was awarded Insurance Broker of the Year multiple times. He sold Mega Capital in 2013 after starting BizCover and BizCover for Brokers, which is aimed at simplifying the process for SMEs and SME brokers in accessing business insurance. Welcome, Michael. Great to have you here.
Thanks, Jane.
All right, lovely. I think we've heard just about enough from me. So let's get this started and start to explore our first topic today, which is factors that contribute to a successful brokerage. So each of our panelists, I think, been in the industry for a long time, have worked in multiple businesses, and I'm sure have seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of business practices. So what I'd love to explore today is, from your experience, some of the things that you've adopted along the way and implemented into your businesses or changed in your current businesses that have helped you along the way with your success. Beck, I'm going to get you to kick off here and then everyone jump in as you see fit. Beck,
Sure
can
thing.
I ask you to just touch on some of your experiences, starting with ABS, some of the challenges that you faced and some of the changes that you made along the way?
Absolutely. Thanks, Jane. So when I first joined ABS, we were 3 companies to 4 companies that were banged into one. And when I say the word banged, I mean banged. We didn't have any process. We had 4 systems. We had 4 different cultures. And unfortunately at that time, because they were banged together, nobody could be in agreement. So the first thing that we really needed to do was to change the culture and have a very strict process around that. The one thing, and I'm happy to share this, the biggest mistake that I made when I came into ABS, we had these 4 companies together and I kept telling everyone what to do, but I wasn't showing them what to do. So about 6 months later, after I was saying, you should do this and you should do this, and getting so frustrated that they weren't doing it, it dawned on me when my mentor told me to lighten up, and I thought I was funny, but clearly I wasn't, that I really needed to change the direction that I was going in and really start working with the team and not working that Beck knew best, and trying to find out what they needed and how I could help them. And the moment 6 months later that I apologized for my behavior by telling people what to do, I certainly got more buy-in from the team, and we started in an education process, which really it took about 3 years, but it really changed the culture through educating as opposed to just telling people.
Thanks, Beck. And you touched on there that you had the 4 different companies banged together. So I guess that means a whole lot of different processes, a whole lot of different systems. How did you tackle that?
Look, that's always the hard part, because nobody likes the C word of change. You know, the my system's better, I know it, and so we had to really work quite hard and actually just bring in one system. And a lot of the people, and I say with the utmost of respect, had been on their systems for 20, 25 years, and we're asking them to change to a whole new system, and that change process was very difficult. But it did, I think people adapt to change, and looking at those systems and that processes when they understand why. So again, it wasn't just a case of saying, well, you have to do this, but actually taking them through the journey, showing what the systems can do and why we need to actually have one system and one process. And I'm sure we'll get into this as we go further down the track, but now more than ever, 13 years on, and over the next 13 years, systems, data, process, they need to be streamlined. There is no way that if what happened 13 years ago happened today, I don't think that people would cope. We've got to get better at getting better systems. We've got to get quicker at it as well. And so I think back then it just took a lot of communication, it took a lot of education, but it was very much about making sure everyone understood the journey that we were going through together. And the big part of that was the togetherness. You can't bang 4 companies together and say, company A, do it this way, B, do it the same way. They needed to come in as just one.
Great, thanks, Beck. Pete, I'm going to ask you to jump in here. I think you've probably had maybe not a similar experience, but coming into P&O, can you talk to, I guess, some of the things that you experienced, you know, fresh eyes, and some of the challenges and changes that you made to contribute to the success of where you are today?
Sure. So the context, I guess, for me is that I'd come from Macquarie Bank, which was very much a high-performing culture. It was a great environment, and I went into P&O, which was a very typical suburban brokerage, very different environment, and it was established in 1977. So when I joined, 2011, the founders had been there for quite some time, and everything was, they were pretty content with how everything was operating. So I think I learned a bit of a lesson in, I could see a lot of change that would be beneficial to the business. But I think it was probably more difficult for me in that I still had the founders and the leaders in the business who probably weren't wanting to change as much as I was, and I found that very difficult. And it's frankly, there was no easy solution to it. And I think it took me a while to realise I had to slow down, and it wasn't going to happen quickly. And if I tried to make it happen quickly, it would actually do more damage than good. So I think, and that was just my circumstances. There will always be people that you need to convince to change that are less likely to change. And in my case, there was a lot of really good things within the business, that we had to retain, but I just had to go slowly on some of the other things.
Did you ever go through that lighten up factor, Pete, when you were feeling frustrated of wanting to move things quickly, and then you go, I'm going too quick and I'm actually not as fun and vibrant as I want to be when you're in that space?
Do you know, it's funny, when you mentioned that before, I've had feedback about you're so focused and disciplined, you've just got to. So one of my goals is to bring more humour into our business. That's one of my personal goals. And people
And how
joke.
are you doing that, Pete?
I tell some really bad jokes on a weekly video update that I do, but it's a conscious effort, to be honest. You just got to focus on it. See the funny side of things. It's only insurance. It's not surgery.
Thanks, Pete. And like the two Mikes, I'll call it Michael G and Mike. I guess you both have, compared to Pete and Beck, who have come into existing companies, both of you have started your own, your own brokerages. And Mike McShane, if I can jump to you, as you know, as I mentioned in your introduction, you've worked in all facets of the industry and have a lot of experience in different companies. When starting McLarty McShane, what are some of the things that you wanted to bring to McLarty McShane, or not bring to McLarty McShane from the lessons that you've learned and experiences you had in your past?
Yep. And look, firstly, unlike Pete, I've never been accused of being focused and disciplined, so it's not my strong suit, I can assure you that. Yeah, look, the thing that sort of experience brings you is everything that happens in your life is an experience. And when I got to McLarty McShane, I'd been in the insurance industry at that stage for 30 odd years or 25 odd years or whatever it was. And you got, the trick is to filter out the bad stuff and really focus on the good stuff and learn from the good stuff. And picking up on what Beck said, what I learned really quickly, just because you're a manager doesn't mean you're a guru of all things. And you really got to take notice and surround yourself with good people, listen to good people, try and get rid of or try and ignore the people that are bringing negative things to your business. And that's the key thing, I think. I think life, insurance life in particular, is all about having good mentors around you, either. And the thing where I've been lucky, I've got great mentors, not only in the business, but in the industry. And, and I know the people here on this panel, for instance, and, they're quality people. So we talk a reasonable amount of time, not as often as we'd like. COVID slowed down us meeting on a few times, but, learning from good people around you is such a key thing.
Thanks, Mike. And Mike G, if you can touch on, some of the things that you've taken with you from your past experience, and particularly as working quite closely with you, I know the particular role that specializing played with you and Mega Capital and your success and growth. If you could also touch on that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the interesting thing about the question is there's so many different answers, and I think that's why business is difficult, business is interesting, business is exhilarating, is because at different stages in the business, there's different things that make it successful. For me, I think there are there are a few very key principles though, and I'll try and make them very specific, particularly the second one to insurance and insurance broking in particular. But the first one, which is more general to any business, is I really think you need to understand who you're representing, who is your customer, and you need to do the best by your customer. Now, in insurance, I think we too often forget, who our suppliers are and who our customers are. And absolutely, you need great relationships with your insurers. You need to be absolutely honest, transparent. Don't lie to your insurers. They've got long-term memories, the underwriters, etc. But in the end of the day, look after your customer. And one of the things that I used to say at Mega Capital, which was our brokerage, was if you are only doing the same job that Aon does, then the customer may as well go to Aon. They're bigger, they're a brand, and they may as well get serviced by Aon. So what I used to say to my team all the time is, when they presented a risk to me before it went to a customer, was, what have you done that Aon wouldn't have done? And I think that is a key thing, right? Whether it's around negotiating better pricing, whether it's around negotiating better coverage, whether it's around understanding their business better so you can actually talk to them about their business. But what have you done that, you know, the biggest broker wouldn't have done? Because by definition, the biggest brokers are the average. So if you want to be above, you know, better than the average, then you need to do something that they hadn't done. And for us as boutique brokerages or as non-international brokerages, the benefit that we have is we don't have to have the same kind of process around, you know, facilitating all of our business. I mean, you know, putting all our business into facilities and schemes and etc. We can know exactly where they're placing their business. We can know the strengths and weaknesses of that, and we can do something better. So again, the first thing I always say is, who's your customer? Are you representing them? And what are you doing that's better than what your opposition or what the average is doing? The second thing is, as Jane was saying, is one of the things I very much believe in is not so much specialization, but is having sufficient similar businesses within your business or customers within your business. Everybody likes to know that you have similar business, similar clients to them. And, you know, quite honestly, whether you are servicing a retail, you know, shoe shop or a cafe, maybe the, you know, the biz pack is not, you know, particularly different, or, you know, the exposures are not particularly different, but actually they want to know that you have other businesses that are similar to them. And, you know, what we did in Mega Capital was we really focused on financial services, and therefore what we went out to do was we knew every single compliance outfit, every auditor, every dealer group, the associations, everyone in that space we knew. And the reason for that was when a financial advisor, a fund manager, a corporate advisor, you know, which was really a sweet spot, when they asked, who should I use for insurance? By default, our name came up because everybody knew us. So whether we were better or not, whether we were, I mean, and hopefully we were, because we used to ask our question, what are we doing that Aon is not? The key thing was everyone knew our name. Everyone knew if they had to, if someone asked you for a recommendation, you have to come up with a name. Well, who is it? And that's why I think specialization or really be, I used to say aim to be famous. And I don't mean aim to be famous in a general sense. I mean in your sphere, in your sandbox, in the customers that you are representing, they should all know you in that small segment. So I guess the first learning that I had was, who is your customer, and look after them and make sure they're comfortable with the service that you're offering. The second one, which I think is very specific to a brokerage, is a brokerage is really about facilitating two sides of a transaction. You need to do a lot of work with your insurers, you need to do a lot of work with your customers, and therefore you're constantly chasing up people. My view is that a good quality broker or brokerage has got excellent processes and systems. Beck spoke a lot about the systems. I think systems are great, and clearly I'm part of BizCover and BizCover for Brokers. So, for me, I'd like to push systems a lot. But I think it's not only about systems, it's about processes. And I think a successful broker is someone who knows, how to structure their time. And what I used to do, just as an example, is I used to start an hour before anyone. And the reason I started an hour before anyone, which is great in the insurance industry, because that means I only had to start at about 9 o'clock. But we could spend an hour. I could spend an hour getting my priorities into other people's inboxes. So if I knew that I was waiting on underwriters on terms for 6 different clients, I would follow those up for the first hour of the day before those underwriters did anything. And therefore, when they got to their inbox, my request was there. At 11 o'clock, my request was there just before they went for lunch. My request was there, and they would hopefully action my priority instead of their priority. And then what I used to do was in the middle of the day, so then I would spend most of the morning doing whatever else I wanted to, what a broker should be doing, touching base with their customers, providing advocacy, whatever else I needed to do. But kind of the initial follow-up was done. And then midday, I'd come back and I would look at what had come back to me from the priorities that I sent out. And maybe I had got requests from an insurer to get more information. So then I would action that to my customers, to the insureds. And again, I would leave it for a few hours doing whatever else I needed to do. And at the end of the day, I would, well, not the end of the day, kind of mid-afternoon, I would do the same thing. So I was constantly having really 3 hours work a day where I was moving my priorities into other people's inboxes. And I think that is key, because if you do that, the rest of the time, actually you got to do whatever you want, right? Whether it's lunch or relationship building, or actual other kind of work, or working on the business, or whatever else. But the actual task of broking is a very, very manual task of largely administrative process, which is following up brokers and following up insurers, following up customers and following up insurers. So I think process around that is key. And then just echoing on some of the other points that you've heard today, which is systems are key, which is, I think that we need, I think the old day of procurement and sourcing of insurance as a broker's key job, I think is behind us. I think really what we've got to be looking at is how can we do the transaction, because sometimes people just want a transaction. And more importantly, how can we provide advocacy and choice and all the things that a broker should be providing, rather than spending our time trying to get quotes, trying to follow up insurers, following up paperwork, etc. And that's where unashamedly I think that biz cover for brokers offers tremendous efficiency for the brokerage industry. I know I've been very long-winded, so I'll just tell one last story, which is when we had Mega Capital, we launched BizCover within Mega Capital initially. And it was a fascinating thing, because what we did was our smallest 10% of our clients, we moved into BizCover. We called them, we said, we love you, you can still call us, we'll provide you all the advice that you need. But this is the easiest, most cost-effective way for you to get your insurance and for us to manage your insurance. And we did that in the first year. And in the second year, we did the same thing again. And by the third year, when we did the same thing again, we actually got quite paranoid about what was happening to our business, because all of a sudden we had sent about 30% of our low value customers into a very efficient process that we were still managing as a broker and still earning the income off, but actually the procurement or sourcing of quotes had become very efficient for us. And it generated so much capacity in our business. And really what we used that capacity for over those 3 years was to find and business develop around higher value customers. And in the end of the day, 3 years later, we still had the same number of customers. We had more customers because we had the ones that were going through BizCover. But if we exclude those, we had the same number of risk managed accounts that we had before we started the process. But our average premium had increased by 40%. And that was because we had moved so many small accounts into a very efficient operating system, and we were then focused on the risk managed account. So just, I guess, a shameless plug for what technology can do to help you with your quote bind issue, and mostly from my perspective, a very important part of broking, your comparison process, where you can do that efficiently.
And just to add to that, Michael, and I think it's very important for brokers to segment their business and look at the opportunity that could go down a platform like BizCover for brokers. But equally, on the higher end of town, when I talk about the harder to place risks, there's three things that we really live by. The first one is people. So people being our clients, our own people, the insurers, so the relationship. The second thing is the technical ability and the way that we represent that ability. And the third thing is budget, because we are running a business and we want to run a successful business. But we put budget as third, because if you get the first two right, you should exceed your budget. But I think one of the most important things, if we compare to a larger international to maybe some mid-market or even smaller brokers, I think the point of difference needs to be that the client has more than one relationship in your business. So if there is a broker there, there should be at least two other people that know that client. Because one of the advantages that we see, which I would assume you had in your previous business, Michael, is that if in the what we call the big box companies, a client service manager leaves and a new one's appointed, the client doesn't know that person and they don't necessarily know anyone else. Whereas there is a level of comfort if a broker leaves and myself or one of my other managers goes out and sees the client and they know us. I think gone are the days of the broker protective nature. That's my client, no one else can touch it. And I think that is a really, really important piece for any broker, particularly newer brokers coming in. Don't hide your client. Be with your client. Take people with you to see your client.
Absolutely. Thanks, Beck. Thanks, Michael. If there any other comments on from the panel on any of the topics Michael brought up there?
The only thing I'd say is, because we're really talking about the efficiency of servicing clients, particularly the small end clients, and in my view, in a brokerage like ours, and I think in most brokerages in Australia, it is barely profitable to service some of those micro SME clients. And I think as brokers, you've got to be disciplined to say, no, you're not suited to us. And I see that as a real trap for less experienced brokers, just to say yes to every single referral that they get. And sometimes you can actually say no in a really professional, helpful way of why you're not going to be suited, a good match for that particular client.
Although that's, sorry.
There you go, Mike.
Thanks, Beck. That's dependent on your life cycle and where you are in your broking life cycle, I reckon. And I agree, when you're a mature business, at times it makes commercial sense to turn business away. But if you're just starting off, any business is good business, right? You've got nothing else to do. You haven't got anything to do during the day. You might as well write anything you can. And the other point I'm quite big on, and we're quite big on in our business, is I grew up in that environment where you're supposed to classify your clients between A, B, and C clients, and you love your A clients, and you don't mind your B clients, and your C clients are almost treated like a waste of time. Well, I'm a big believer that if you call it a small business, a corner milk bar who pays $1,000, that's a big deal to them. And if you're going to do it, you've got to do it properly and do it respectfully and add value. Otherwise, as Michael alluded to about going to Aon, what do we do different from the direct market? And if we're doing SME business and home and contents and private motor business, if we're not doing it better than the direct market, if we're not adding value, well, we shouldn't be doing it. So, and the other thing I was going to say, if I can, Pete, on your point, absolutely agree. But when you're starting off, every client should be an advocate of you. So if you're just starting off, the more client numbers you have, hopefully, if you do a good job, you've got them telling other people how good you are, and then it becomes an advertising medium for you. And whilst you think, oh, those small clients will become big clients, typically they don't, but they do become great advocates for you, and that's a good thing. And then as you build,
even as a new broker starting off, if you focus on them, they're going to refer like-minded clients. You're going to end up with a book of what I'd call C or D clients. So you've got to, I get your point. I'm still going to challenge you on it, because you've got to be really careful. And I've seen it.
Pete, I had a similar experience. I was very vocal at Mega Capital, where I was like, our minimum earn should be $1,000 earn, commission and fees, but I had a very big but to that, and my but was unless they are a financial planner, and that was because that was our sandbox, and we had created such efficiency around that the amount of word of mouth, and they may refer similar customers to themselves, but some of those are much bigger because of the industry we were in. But again, I think it's not about saying no to customers. I think obviously there's some customers you should say no to. I often say it's more the behavior of the customer than the size of the customer that you should be saying no to. But the size of the customer just means the process that you need to service them effectively. Because I cannot agree more than with what Mike said, which if you're going to take on a customer, add value. And if you can't add value because the process of broking is so time consuming and paper based, you need to fix that. But we should be able to make money. I mean, let's be honest, as an industry, there are very few industries that have the margins that brokers have. It is an amazing industry. It is an amazing industry that has been incredibly lucrative to, you know, thousands and thousands of businesses, and we have, you know, we have good margins, so we should be able to service most businesses. It's just about the process that we go through to service them.
So I'll go a step further, Pete and Mike. There is not a single client that we would ever turn away, ever, unless the behavior was wrong, because we've set up the teams to make sure that they can service the client in the correct way and the correct forum. And we make sure that in our SME space, where we have micro SME, we have a process where no matter what, we will make money from it. But if you're putting an SME client with a corporate broker, then you're absolutely right. It's never going to work. But if we structure our business where we've got, in SME, we've got express cover or biz cover for brokers, and we say, right, we understand that we're going to use that platform. It's going to take us 10 minutes. The client will take it or leave it. They'll get the advice that they require, and we might earn $300 off it for 10 minutes worth of work. And then that customer there, which as brokers, regardless of what we earn, we give advice. And I think anyone that's buying insurance within the community is entitled to advice, no matter what, because we're brokers and that's what we do best. So I believe if we set our process and our business up correctly, then there shouldn't be a customer that we turn away. In addition to that, the old trap of A, B, C, and D clients is very dangerous to business culture and to employees, because no employee wants to be known as the D team. And so if you set up a great SME team with a great process, and in our business, our SME team is actually one of the most profitable, and yet we have a really large corporate team, and I would actually call our SME team the A team. So I think it's how you structure your business and how you structure your process. But I do agree, Pete, if you try and put an SME client in with a corporate broker, then that is wasting the time of the corporate broker, but it doesn't mean that the SME broker is not as good. It's just different.
Thanks.
Yeah.
It's actually a perfect segue into the next topic, and we've got quite a few questions coming through. So I'm going to try and move a little bit quicker so we have some more time at the end for questions as well. But fantastic discussion, thank you. So Mike, touching on something you said before, it depends on where you are in your journey. So the next topic is around lead generation, and I'm going to direct initially to the two Mikes, because you both had the experience of starting a brokerage from scratch. And when you start from scratch, what did you do? How do you generate leads? How do you get yourself up and running? Mike, I'll head to you first.
A couple of things. Firstly, you talk to as many people that you know as you can to say that you're starting up your own business. And typically, people like to help people who are having a bit of a go and having a crack and starting their own business. And the other thing is, which I did, and I think a lot of people do, is I did employ, if you like, a lead generation specialist who generated a lot of leads in a couple of areas I wanted to focus on. And the trick with that is, once you've got the leads, you've got to follow them through. You've got to ring them. You've got to get a due date. And typically with these lead generation businesses, which there's a few very good ones, they'll give you a name and a bit of a background about the business and when their due date is, because that's what they've asked them. And they've said, yes, we're interested in getting a quote. Please call me in August. And then the trick is you must follow that through. You must immediately send out a confirmation or a nice little friendly note to them to say, I'll be calling you in whenever it is. Then call them. Sometimes when you call them, they say, no, I only just wanted to get the bloke off the phone, and their business is due in February or whatever. But it's a numbers game to keep at it. That's when you're just starting off. Once you get to a bit of a reasonable level, those leads become self-generating from your existing client base and referrals, which is the best sort of leads you can get anyway. Although I'd be interested in perhaps Beck and Pete's and Michael's comments, taking what you said, Beck, in relation to farming, if you like, people out to the right areas within your business. If someone's referred to you, Beck, personally by someone else who knows you personally, do you then transact that business irrespective initially, or do you say, oh look, that fits better into my SME
No,
area?
we keep it with the referral. You know, if there's
Yeah.
a broker that's been recommended, and my comments before were generally speaking. I mean, there's always a place, and a corporate broker that's got a very large client who refers a very small client is still thinking about their very large client and wants to impress them. So no, that was more of a general comment, but we would keep that client with the corporate broker.
Mike,
And then I think, sorry, and I think then I agree, Beck, that I think it's then important at the end of each year or end of a period, just farm out some of those businesses to where they sit and let the client know that you're still around. Just that,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And that goes back to my point before, Mike, that the client needs to know more than one person. So if in time we transition it, then and something goes wrong, they've still got that person there to go to.
Yeah, my view, Mike, is you've got to have in mind who's it going to ultimately, and get them out there right from the start, because the client doesn't want to invest their time and energy building a relationship with me if I'm going to palm them off. And I would rather say, hey, this is Jane, she's going to be your primary contact, but I'm always going to be here and we work closely together.
Yeah.
I mean, Mike, I think there's a few really interesting things there. I think the first is people like the relationship. So I think it's very difficult to, if someone's referred to you, to palm them off. But what I used to say was, whoever's brought in the business needs to be on the first and the last call and needs to know enough about the account. Everything else in between, they don't need to be involved. So, and I think customers are fine with that. I think, I would take the first call. I would bring someone onto the call with me, so that there were two kind of relationships. And then, on the last call, I'd be there to, make sure that the customer knows that I was involved and, I've given my stamp of approval, which may or may not have been needed, but it's what the customer was looking for. But if I can just go back to Jane's question and some of the stuff that you mentioned. So I absolutely have a very similar start to my business as you had to yours, which was we took any customer who came our way. In the end of the day, it's about capacity. If you've got capacity, actually your time is worth zero. So you may as well service the client than not service them. So our strategy right at the beginning was professional services. And our second client that we ever did was a company called Australian Road Seal Coating or something. I can't actually remember the name, but literally they repaired roads. Now, it's clearly not a professional there, but it came our way. So in terms of how did we get customers, right in the beginning, what's great is the media create lists for everything. So we just picked up those lists literally. And the first one we picked up was accountants. We knew very little about it, and there's actually a bit of a funny story which I won't go into now. But we literally just started phoning accountants and saying, who do you, who's your insurance with? When is it due? Can we help you? And just to remind you, both myself and my business partner at the time, neither of us were actually from the insurance industry, so we literally knew nothing. And when we got our first opportunity, again to emphasize how little I knew, I called NRMA because that was the insurance company I knew. And when I realized they didn't even know what professional indemnity was, I then stumbled across a Lloyd's book, which back in the day had every Lloyd's underwriting agency in Australia on it. And I literally started phoning them. And one thing led to another. And what I found out after, not long, was that close to 100% of accountants in Australia at that stage, or certainly chartered accountants, were with Marsh, through Markel, through a facility. And if they weren't, they were through Aon with Dexter. So very quickly, I could understand, what the Markel product was, or what the Aon Marsh product was, what the Aon product was, and kind of understand what they were offering. And again, through this process, I stumbled across Don Booker, who many of you would know, who said to me, Willis have a facility through Allianz. And I phoned Tanya Ferguson, and who again many of you would know, and she said, yes, we can place accountants. And I was like, wow, we've got a facility that no accountants know about. Willis weren't particularly good at marketing their facility, so we did it. And we literally went to this top 100 accounting firms, and we said, we've got a market that you don't know about. And very quickly what happened was, again, it was 2001 tech wreck, then HIH collapsed, so premiums went very, very high, and therefore customers were willing to talk to us. But one of the accountants said to us, listen, my premium's gone up like hundreds of percent. I can't remember what it was. They said, but that's not the issue. The issue is we've got a Part 4A exclusion in our wording. And I was like, thanks, but that means nothing to me. But I went and I got to understand what a Part 4A exclusion was. And effectively what it means is it's excluding tax minimization schemes. Now, I think most people go to their accountant in part to minimize tax. So what this accountant was saying to me was, even if we do it legitimately, there's this Part 4A exclusion where if the ATO can't catch you on anything else, they'll catch you on this. So what was really interesting was we then got to understand their concern. We then worked with Allianz to understand what they were trying to exclude. And what they were trying to exclude was mass marketed tax schemes. But their wording said, we're excluding Part 4A, any claims in relation to Part 4A. So we negotiated and went back and forward and eventually got Allianz to agree to add in the word mass marketed. So literally we kept their wording identical, but added in 2 words, which made the customer happy, which made the insurer happy. And then we went back to our list that the BRW had created for us and phoned literally every accounting firm and said, do you know you have this exclusion in your wording? Because again, we had checked the Marsh wording, we had checked the Aon wording, they both had it. And they were like, wow, we've got a tax 4A exclusion and we can get rid of it. And within about a year, 9 months to a year, we were probably the largest writer of accountants in Australia. We picked up, and not necessarily by number, but by premium, we picked up like literally 20 of the top 100 accounting firms. So again, it comes back to specialization, because again, the first accountant we picked up was a accountant called Green, Pinckless and Lawson, GPL, and it was like $150,000. And I was like, this is too easy, like, wow. And they didn't ask us anything. But the very, very next day, we picked up a very small one-man band accounting firm, and they said to me, can you give me a reference? And I went, of course I can. The client we picked up yesterday. But so again, it was familiarity. It was having similar customers. It was focusing on a specific industry, and it was getting to understand a problem in the wording. Now, not in every industry and not in every product can we find that coverage gap. But if you can find something that adds value, shout it out. Go out to similar customers and explain to them what you can do. So the start of our business was really around cold prospecting. We did it ourselves. We picked up the phone, we called all these people. Most, a big chunk of them didn't want to speak to us, but the ones that we got through to that we could tell about this issue, our strike rate was unbelievable. So that was the start of it. And then I think, to Mark's point, you get a lot of referrals from your base if you're doing a good thing. And just as a very small tip, what I find amazing is, Mike mentioned, make a note and follow up your customer when you told them you'll follow up. So I'll call you in August. Well, actually call them in August. And exactly. what I found so amazing were how so many customers were surprised that we did what we said we were going to do. It's not difficult, right? Like, manage your customers' expectations, because if you tell them you're going to do something and you do it, you're already better than the average.
So you've just given all the young professionals a great tip there, Michael, but I just wanted to take note that you've made me feel really old. And for anyone that was born in 2000 and 2001, give me a call and I'll let you know who HIH and Dexter were.
That's right.
I think you touched on an interesting point. So there, Michael, Mike McShane, you made a comment to me once around, a trick for young players around pick up the phone. It's the relationships, pick up the phone rather than, send the email, which I think is what Michael's also saying here around relationship development. Sorry, Mike, I interrupted you.
And Beck, as a tip for the young brokers out there, that Part 4A exclusion is still in 90% of the wordings.
It is. You still got it, Michael. What were you going to say, Mike? Sorry.
I was just saying about Michael that the thing about all those accountants, the one thing you didn't talk about is price. Price didn't even come into it, because if we're competing on price, we're going to win on price and lose on price. If you can build on something sustainable like a wording, it amazes me in that situation where Aon and Marsh didn't go to their underwriters and just put in mass marketed. It would have solved would have saved them losing a lot of their business. But yeah, once you can get away from price and add that advice piece and value piece, price becomes secondary. Always important, but secondary.
Both of you have mentioned the word value and added value. So thank you. You've given me the perfect segue to the next topic, which is around addressing uninsured exposures, or, more plainly put, cross-sell, upsell. What value? I'll let whoever wants to jump in here. What value do you place on, cross-sell or uninsured exposures for a growth strategy within your business? We'll start there, and then we can talk about how we upskill brokers or generate a buzz around that.
Well,
Go
before
on,
you
Pete.
even get to it being a growth strategy, it's absolutely essential to what we do. We're not doing our job if we're not educating the client. It is so important. I often see the renewal manuals that we all send out with the list at the very back with 70 different policy classes and which one, and the ticks that say which ones have you got and which ones don't you have. It frustrates me because we should be understanding our clients and giving them good advice around what aren't they covered for, what are they underinsured for. And often it'll be an education process where the end decision is, no, we're comfortable with that risk, we'll self-insure. But too often we don't have the conversation. I almost don't like the word cross-sell because it shouldn't be
or
selling.
upsell.
Yeah, or upsell. It's education, it's advice.
Do you find all panelists that the people within your brokerages, it's part of their everyday dialogue with their customers? Do they feel comfortable raising what's often thought of secondary purchases, your ML or your cyber? And if not, how do you generate a buzz around it or upskill brokers around that?
I think it's important that I agree with you, Pete. It's not upsell or cross-sell, it's actually offering advice. And I'm a huge believer that we are trusted advisors. So when we're talking to clients about ML and cyber in particular, they need to trust that what we're telling them is correct. If you try to talk to a client about a machinery breakdown policy and they don't have machinery, well, they're not going to trust you. But you've got to be real. That's the reality of it. If you're real with your client and you can explain why they need it and they trust you, off good advice comes a sale, but it is the advice that's most important.
And I think that for me is very important. I think really important that this is not a growth strategy. It's not about upselling, cross-selling, or a growth strategy. This is about us doing the right thing by customers. I think if you go back right at the beginning, Beck mentioned a few different successful attributes of a brokerage. And one of them at the end she mentioned was the economics of it. I can't remember the words she used, but how much we charge customers. And I think where this looking after customers falls down is that it is very, very difficult actually to obtain these quotes. So, the time, again, there's no connectivity, the amount of time and paper pushing and number of insurers that you need to speak to actually get the comparison to provide a proper broking process to a customer is difficult. And that, that to be honest, that was really the prime reason for setting up BizCover for brokers was single data entry, multiple quotes from multiple insurers across multiple classes of insurance. And I just think that if insurers made it easier, if you could deal one with the same underwriter with the same proposal form, then whether you use a system or not is irrelevant. But if you could make it simple so that when they produce their PI quote, if it was relevant, they could get an ML quote. If it was relevant, they could get a cyber quote. Then I think that the care for our customers would be better. But the problem at the moment is, particularly for SME customers, it's uneconomical for a brokerage to continue to run around the market, when you go to whoever, QBE for your PI, but they don't do cyber. So then you have to start in a new proposal form, and some of them want questions around two-factor authentication and others that whatever around the cyber. It's too difficult, so too time-consuming, too costly. So I think if, one of the problems I think is, again, brokers need to think about their systems, their processes that they've got around assisting their brokers, obtain the relevant quotes for their customers.
Thank you. I'm
And
going to, we've
if I
got
could-
10 minutes left. Sorry,
Sorry,
jump in,
Jane.
Mike.
I was just going to say, one of the motivations for everyone around this uninsured loss bit has to be when one of your clients rings up and says, this has happened to me, you're able to, you don't say, oh, look, you're not covered for that. You could have had it, but I didn't get around to telling you. I'm sorry. That has to be your motivation. And the even bigger motivation is when a client rings up and says, this has happened to me, you actually feel good that you've got the cover for them. You've done your job. It's working the way it should be, and that's the key motivation as well, I reckon.
Mike, we have a question that's come through specifically. It's on the previous topic, but that's comes through specifically for you around warm leads and lead generation. And if you are aware whether anti-hawking existed in the days that you were using the lead generation companies, and whether, if anybody, is it possible? Do we know whether lead generation businesses to allow you to talk to potential clients would be possible in today's anti-hawking environment? If anyone, Mike, it was addressed to you, but if anyone has any thoughts.
Well, firstly, it wasn't, thank goodness, when I was doing that, because I don't think that's a very good question. I hadn't thought of it as to whether that would be allowed now. I'm hoping perhaps one of our younger people might be aware, might be doing it. I don't know.
You have to be very careful of anti-hawking laws. So, under legislation, there are very strong views around anti-hawking, and generally speaking, if a client makes their email address public, that they can be contacted, then usually it's okay, but not necessarily via phone, particularly with EDM. And also with your EDM management, you must have that unsubscribe. So if it's a client on your database or a previous client where they've given you permission to contact them, then that's generally not an issue. If the domain is made public, so you go onto someone's website and it says contact me at rebecca.wilson, then that's okay. But if you're getting on the phone and trying to find people's details, you would be running a very fine line with anti-hawking.
I think a lot of this comes down to be sensible. I mean, if you're going out to tens of thousands of customers, I think, or prospects, I think that's different. If you to Mike's point, going on a telephone-based, campaign to very specific industries where you're going onto their websites, understanding a little bit about their business, and then calling a telephone number that they've provided, I don't know the laws, but I can't imagine that there'd be too many issues.
I guess you just ask the question though yourself, if you get a phone call with a number that you don't know, or it couldn't be a client, do you really want to take it anyway? And I know I don't. So I think those days may have changed. They worked at the time and that was wonderful, but I think we've evolved since then.
Yeah.
I've always found Mike to be a law-abiding citizen too, just for the record.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Pete.
We've got a question here which leads us onto the question of technology, which I think we've touched on a fair bit already. So I'll let this question lead us into that topic. What are your views on automation within the broking industry? I'm an authorised representative working alone and would like to invest in AI to make my life easier.
Do it.
Cool topic. I mean, I'm probably not the right one to answer this because I'm a massive advocate of AI, and we have probably less AI, but lots of automation in our business. So even basic things. I mean, again, our business is high volume, so many customers that most brokerages don't want. Those are the customers we do want, and therefore we need very good processes and systems around handling volume. But just basic things like if customers ask for certificates of currency, policy documents, cancellations, any of those kind of things, which are your common questions, if they send an email, we have automation reading or artificial intelligence reading that email and responding with a copy of the certificate of currency, a copy of the policy wording, a copy of the whatever. So I think it's critical to efficiency in the business.
I think from a broking
that
point of
level
view,
of automation. Sorry, Beck, go for it.
No, you go. I think we were going to say the same thing, Jane. So
No, No, you go.
I was just going to say, I think that level of automation, we need to be careful as brokers because we still want to have that personal service. But if you're talking about AI as far as bots are concerned to upload and get your quoting done, if you're an AR working alone and you've got some SME business, and I don't think that bots work for larger clients, but if you do have SME clients, I would suggest that an investment in robotics is a very good idea if you can and when you can. And obviously you run your own business, but you might have to put it in a 1 or 2 year plan, or you might be able to do it now.
Do you have it in your business, Beck, AI?
Yes. Yeah, we've got Don Johnson, our bots that upload renewal terms for us, and it's very helpful in that SME space.
At a minimum, use systems, and then you can get onto automation, robotics, etc.
Yeah,
I mean,
with
to
Beck,
what
one step at a time.
Yeah, and depending on the size of the business, what would be viable to implement? I mean, for each of you, have you, even if we're not going as far as AI, have you implemented technology to streamline processes or efficiency? And if you can share in any way of what you have done in your brokerages?
Well,
Yeah.
I think we're part of the Steadfast group, and so we've had a hand held for us a bit with a number of those things, including that Steadfast client trading platform, which gives you 8 quotes automatically on SME type business, and gives you 2 or 3 or 4 on depends what day it is, on domestic business. So that's sort of helped along. With the chap before as an authorised rep on his own, it is obviously really, really hard to make significant investments in your business with a long-term view right at the start, because you send yourself so far backwards. So yeah, there's some bravery required there in doing that, and I'm not sure of the cost of implementing that, but that's a tough call for him. Certainly a good idea, but whether it's commercially sensible initially is the other question, I reckon.
Yeah, just our approach to technology is we don't want to develop technology. We'll certainly buy it where we think it makes sense. I'd like to say we'll progress a lot faster in terms of our use of technology. The one thing we have done in the last 12 months is we've found a software that really assists us in developing a lot of the templates, a lot of the high volume correspondence that we use on a regular basis. We're the only broker in Australia. They're only an Australian client. We engaged with a New Zealand broker that was using it to really understand it, and yeah, so far it's working well.
Jane, we at Mega Capital, we again, just going back to the point of large numbers of homogeneous clients of similar industries, similar customers, we developed templates for those customers, so we knew who the insurers that we were going to go to for those risks. We had kind of preloaded their standard terms, conditions, endorsements, exclusions, our summary, our recommendation, etc., and then could pick from the list depending on which insurers quoted, who was most competitive, etc. So it just, again, the template, kind of thinking about the legal industry that have what's the word I'm looking for, precedents and templates and whatever, like that's kind of what we did around segments within our business. So it doesn't all have to be AI or robotics.
Thanks, Michael. I'm going to put it out there to the panel, if everyone would mind if we went a little 5 minutes over, as we have quite a few questions that have come through.
Yep.
So, and obviously everyone, please feel to stay on the line if you have an extra 5 minutes for the day. So we have a question that's come through, which is about how do you see the best path to overcome current staffing issues within insurers, insurance builders, and the industry in general? There's an example here. As an example, direct insurers such as RSC can allocate a trade offer much quicker than we see via insurance builder to a client via a broker. Who wants to jump in?
I don't know that there's an answer for it. That's the hard part. Michael, Pete, did you want to jump in, or are you happy?
Happy to leave it to you, Beck.
Yeah, thanks for that,
Yeah.
guys. Yeah, so I guess, look, it is a problem, but I think one of the things that I think with brokers, we need to nag the insurers. You need to stay onto it. It's no different to trying to negotiate a renewal and having tenacity. I think claims management needs to be tenacious. If you need to escalate, escalate. But the importance of clients and getting builders out there, I think it is a problem. We need to stay communicative with the client. We need to hold the insurers accountable, and they need to hold their providers accountable. But all I can say at the moment, particularly with the floods and the builders and the lack of availability, I would stay tenacious and escalate as much as you can. I think the other thing that we need to get better at as a profession as a whole is identifying those people that are vulnerable, that come from these types of claims, and they need to be protected and prioritised. So I think, again, we need to know our clients' needs and protect them more than maybe not what we want to do, but what we can do, and just making sure that we push that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And we've talked a lot about, in this last hour, we've talked a lot about technology, but all the technology chat is around sales and management and efficiencies within the office. But typically as an industry, I'm not sure we focus enough on technology in the claims area. And as a result, I think we're still really sadly lacking. There is a lot of software around now where, as an example, builders or people can just go in and scan damaged areas and immediately get a replacement cost to repair that area. And the sooner we can build on things like that within our industry and start getting more efficient in the claims process, it's going to be a lot better for all of us, I reckon.
Yep, I reckon you're right.
So we've got two questions here, which they're in a similar vein, so I'll try and join them together. How do you ensure brokers, particularly more junior brokers, have a sufficient knowledge base, especially on the more complex classes? And how do you currently train them on this? And I'll link this with, apart from industry training events, are there any other resources for training that you would and development that you would recommend?
Take them to see the clients.
Yeah.
Get
Sorry,
them
Pete,
out.
say that again.
Get them out seeing clients with you. You know, there's so much to be learned on the car trip there and on the car trip home. And it's so much more interesting for them. It sinks in. And then read the policies.
I think it's a great question to tie into work from home, back to the office. You know, I just think there's so much that has, to Pete's point, that is learned from working with people with experience. But yeah, I agree. Expose them early and hopefully they take initiative, because the policy wordings are English. We can read them, we just choose not to.
Yeah, I agree. And you go, Mike, sorry.
Yeah, no, you go, Beck. Sorry, you go.
I was going to say the same as Pete. Don't just go out with one broker, go out with multiple brokers so that you can get your own style. But the other thing I would say to anyone that's a young professional on this forum, if you're good enough, you're old enough. So get good enough.
Yeah.
Great saying.
You can use it.
Yeah.
Mike, did you have something to add there?
No, I was actually going to say exactly what Michael was saying in relation to this work from home and the COVID years we've been in. I'd hate to be a young starter now in the business because there's no one to learn off, and there's many ways of learning. There's formal learning, obviously going to seminars and podcasts and webinars and the like, and being taught by people directly, but there's also that osmosis we get within an office of learning and listening and hearing and almost taking a subconscious note of what people say and thinking that sounds like a sensible way to say that. And I'm a big believer there's a whole lot of things we know, we've got no idea how we know them, we just know it, we've just sponged it over the years. So yeah, I'm old fashioned when it comes to getting back to work. I want to get the whole workforce back in the office ASAP for lots of reasons, and nothing to do with productivity, more to do with learning, and we're a people business.
Right, thank you. So last question, which I'll get everybody to answer here, is what's one of the biggest mistakes you have made along the way? Mike Gottlieb, I'll put you
I've
in the
shared
hot seat
mine,
first.
so I'll leave it with these guys. Go for it.
Oh, you have two, Beck. You have
Yeah.
two. So Mike Gottlieb, I'll put you in the hot seat first.
Look, I think there's lots of mistakes that you make along the way. The biggest, I'm trying to think of so many big ones. I think the reality is, you need to look at, success over a long period of time, and some of these small hiccups along the way over a long period of time are just natural course of business. But what I'd say is definitely my weakest point is the whole hiring and offboarding process. I don't think I spent enough time, hiring the candidates that are key to the business. So I don't think that process finds necessarily the right candidate every time. And that's okay, because we make mistakes. The problem is it then takes me too long to rectify that mistake too. So I think, I think it's very cliched and very, you can read it in any book, but I think it's absolutely key to have the right people in the right seats. And that's based on your culture, your values, your objectives, because there's many roads to get somewhere. Doesn't mean your road is right, but it is the road that everybody needs to be on. And having people all, with different culture, with different objectives, wanting to do things differently, doesn't necessarily work. I think diversity, inclusiveness, difference of opinion, all that kind of stuff is great, but ultimately you need to be moving in the right direction. So certainly the thing that's cost my business more than anything is the failure to move people on.
Thank you. Other Mike.
Oh, I would agree with Michael, absolutely. And someone told me that you should hire slow and fire fast. In that, you spend your time getting the right people. Every now and again, you'll muck it up. But when you have got the wrong person for whatever reason, and then they're a square peg in a round hole, you need to be brave and moving on quickly for the good of both of you, really.
Right. Thank you. And Pete, final word from you. Make it a big mistake.
I think we've got the hiring right. My biggest mistake is and I can't go too much into it, but it was an opportunity, a transaction where we just got lured by the numbers, the size of the opportunity, and didn't really, there was a little bit of an inkling in our gut, and we didn't follow it through. So it ended up costing us a lot of time and money. And there's a saying, I think it was Mark Corder said, beware of bankers with spreadsheets. It's a really good saying.
You used to be one of those. You used to be one of those, Pete.
I know.
You used to love your spreadsheets.
Be careful.
Well, they're very, very wise words to finish on there, Pete. And look, thank you for all of our panelists. I think the number of questions that have come through shows, I guess, what an interesting topic this is for people. And I do apologise that we haven't managed to get to all the questions. I'm gonna promise on behalf of the panelists, I'm gonna try and get some written responses to some of these questions and get these out to everybody over email. So do check your emails. We will be sending also a video of the webinar for everybody. So thank you again for everybody that has attended, and to our panelists, and we will try and come back to you with some of your queries shortly. And once again, everybody, happy birthday, Mike.
Happy birthday, Mike. Thank you very much, Jane.
Thanks, Jane. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
Bye-bye.